Good evening, everyone. I extend to each and every one of you a very warm welcome. I'm Chief Al Compan of our fine, wonderful Edmonds Police Department. And obviously, you picked this evening to come and join us tonight. Beautiful late spring, early summer evening. We're here for what I think you will find, what I know you'll find to be a very meaningful evening. And I'd like to start by asking you all to join me in the flag salute. Would you please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. You may be seated. And again, I welcome you all. This is our 17th annual awards night. This is an opportunity for we, as members of the Edmonds Police Department, to recognize our own members for their special contributions to our law enforcement mission over this past year. It's also an opportunity, equally as important, to recognize members of our community who have been instrumental as individuals or as part of volunteer groups who have assisted us with our mission. This week is National Police Week. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy signed a proclamation designating May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which it falls as Police Week. Each year we pause to recognize the over 900,000 law enforcement officers who serve across these United States. In particular, we remember the more than 20,000 law enforcement officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed on the line of duty since the first recorded death in 1792. In 2017, 128 law enforcement officers and corrections officers lost their lives. This is a decrease, thankfully, from 2016. So far this year, unfortunately, 45 officers have given their lives in the line of duty. Since Washington became a state in 1889, 286 officers have been killed in Washington state, the most recent being Pierce County Deputy Daniel McCartney on January 7th, 2018. So as we go through this evening, keep those members in mind, please. I do have a few special introductions before we proceed. I'd like to recognize Mayor Dave Erling, who is here with us this evening. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us. We have Council Members Christiana Johnson, Adrian Fraley-Manias, and Councilmember Dave Teitzel with us. Thank you for joining us. We have a very active police foundation, and we are very grateful to the contributions that our police foundation has made over 22 years now, I think we have, partnership with the foundation. Our foundation president, Bill Nelson, is here. Please raise your hands as I call your name. And I know Bill loves to have attention drawn to him. He'd be seated out in the lobby right now if it was up to him. But Bill, and I'm very grateful to Bill. It was through his efforts, and others in the department certainly, but Bill was very responsible for orchestrating the first annual Edmonds Police Department Awards Night, and here we are now on the 17th. So Bill, thank you. Other foundation members present, Darlene Stern up here in the front row, Gail Welfinger, Nancy Barilla, and Kimberly MacArthur. And I have to beg for forgiveness. Did I miss anybody on foundation? Wendy, Kendall. Yeah, so let's give the foundation and our city council members and our mayor a round of applause. Thank you so much. Also assisting me this evening with the awards ceremony are to my far left, your far right, Assistant Chief Jim Lawless. Next to him, Assistant Chief Don Anderson and Sergeant Shane Hawley. And actually, The person that really runs the police department is my executive assistant, Caroline Thompson, who is standing over there and deserves a round of applause on her own. So Phil Ossink, one of our longtime chaplains, is here with us this evening. Thank you for joining us, Phil. We'll now deliver an invocation. Thank you for being here.
Please pray with me. Almighty God, we come tonight to honor those who serve our community. We give thanks for women and men who have dedicated their lives to serve and protect. We thank you for families that have been gracious in sharing their husbands and wives, their dads and moms, and their sons and daughters. We ask you to continue to protect those who protect us. Give them wisdom in difficult circumstances, strength when they feel weak, and gentleness as they tend to the lost and the broken. Tonight we give thanks for the life of service demonstrated by our dear friend and brother Ken Gatos. May the host of people from civilians to chiefs that he has touched be always mindful of the way he touched their lives with compassion and his dedication. We ask you to give him strength of body and soul for the challenges he faces in his life's journey today. We pause to remember those who have paid the ultimate price with their lives while protecting others. We remember especially Deputy Daniel McCartney. Help us as those who are served to live with respect and gratitude for the dedication of those who serve us and for their commitment. In your most holy name we pray. Amen.
I'll now introduce again Mayor Dave Earling, who has a few remarks for us this evening. Thank you again, Mayor, for joining us.
Well, good evening. It's an honor once again to be here this evening. It's an event that I truly look forward to every year. You have reason to celebrate tonight, whether you're here as family or friends or officers or staff. Obviously, for your own good work, doing a great job of keeping the community safe, and more importantly, or at least to me, as important, is we have the respect of the community and they understand the department, and it's easily accessible. That's key to me, is to be sure that the people who feel safe have open communication with the people that they serve. Special to me too, as I know as it would be to you, we will tomorrow welcome 2 new officers to the force. Jocelyn Jamala and Ashley James. While I'm sure they are great additions to the force, and I'm looking forward to meeting them tomorrow, as important to me is they're both Washington State University Cougars. That wasn't even a cheap shot. Seriously though, related to that issue, and knowing that we're going to have some additional officers added tomorrow, is I know how hard it is now to recruit. I mean, whether we're talking about recruiting police officers or any other staff members, it's brutal out there right now. You know, the unemployment rate is low, and finding good people is really a challenge. And I want to compliment the police force for the sort of marketing job, if you will, when they try and bring people in for the city of Edmonds. I've seen some of the visual work that they've done, and it's absolutely spectacular. And it gives candidates good reason to want to work here. And so compliments to the force for taking care of that too. Of great relief to me, and maybe to some of you, and I know it's appreciated, we finally will be able to reinstitute the school officer program this coming fall. The downturn in 2008, we had to eliminate that position, and we were finally able, working with the school district, because we do divide the cost for it, we are able to put someone back in the schools. And it's important to me, and I would think to many of the parents here in the audience, knowing that there's someone in the school who's watching out for the school and students' safety. Tonight, we are not only honoring you, our police officers, but also special recognition needs to be given to the rest of the department. It's not just the frontline officers that make this police department the powerful body that it is. It's the staff from the top to the bottom that make it work. And I'm also just really pleased that as part of this, and it's happened every year that I've been here, we take the time to acknowledge brave people in the community who step forward at the right time to be helpful to the police department and the safety of the people in our community. All of you, your active participation makes our community proud, and it makes it whole, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Earling, and I'm going to now turn the podium over to Sergeant Shane Hawley, and we will start with the awards. Sergeant Hawley.
There we go. All right, good evening, everybody. I know it's very hot in here, so we'll make sure we get going right off the bat here. The first award for tonight is the Citizen Service Citation. This category is awarded to citizens whose assistance to the police department was given without regard to personal welfare or which had a positive bearing on the outcome of an incident and contributed to the furtherance of law enforcement. So at this time, I'd like to call up Mr. Douglas Horton, if he's here. There he is. While working in his garage, Douglas Horton heard a loud noise outside his house. He recognized the noise was coming from a passing car, and he noticed a car driving by with its front bumper hanging off. Now, some people might look the other way. Others might just simply call 911. Douglas took a different approach. He jumped in his car and decided to follow it, realizing it had just been in a car crash. Douglas found the car at a dead end with the driver already walking away. And he probably would have just called 911 at that point in time, but he forgot his phone at home. These things happen. Still not willing to let it go, he drove back home, then called 911, and drove back to the area to actually meet officers, and ultimately identified the suspect for us when we found him in the area. Little did Douglas know the suspect that fled not only had hit another car, but he actually hit a pedestrian that was walking into the crash scene to try and help the driver. And that suspect was ultimately charged with a felony hit and run. Because of Douglas's willingness to get involved, we're pleased to present him with the Citizen Service Citation. Oh, he doesn't have it with him now. All right, next we'd like to call up Heather James. While out driving, Heather James noticed smoke coming from a home in the 20600 block of 80th Avenue West. She didn't see any flames, but she knew the house was on fire. Now, she assumed somebody had already called 911, but decided to stop anyway when she realized nobody was outside of the house. As she did, she saw children walking outside of the smoke-filled house, and they weren't wearing any shoes. Heather called 911 at that point, and as it turns out, she was the first person to actually call 911. While on the phone, one of the kids decided to go back inside, grab a fire extinguisher, and try and put the fire out. Now, Heather could see the flames in the kitchen and realized a fire extinguisher wasn't going to cut it. So she managed to get everybody out of the house and stayed with the children until their parents arrived. However, Heather didn't just stop there. Realizing that this family might have further needs, she decided to start a social media campaign to raise funds for them for any financial needs they might have. And for her actions, we're pleased to present Heather James with the Citizen Service Citation. So our next award for this evening is a Special Business Recognition Award. And we'd like to have Mr. Barry Crane come up. I realize he is out, but I believe Alan Skoog. Did I say that correct, sir? Skoog. Whew, good, first time. And he is a pastor with North Sound Community Church. So as police officers, it's important we stay in shape. Chasing down bad guys is tough work. In fact, we have a yearly physical fitness test, which involves push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. Now, Barry and the team at North Sound Community Church do their best to make sure we have to work extra hard to pass this test every year. They're constantly bringing us treats as a way of showing support. In fact, here's one example. They brought us a police officer survival kit filled with all sorts of candy. Thank goodness we also have a very good dental plan here. Seahawk-inspired treats, all sorts of things. There's always baskets in the lunchroom thanks to North Sound Community Church. However, their generosity really goes beyond just bringing us food. They've provided funding for domestic violence victims and housing. And in fact, in the fall of 2016, our own Corporal Damian Smith, who's in the back, and if you could come up, that'd be great, was in the middle of a lengthy military deployment. Corporal Smith was in charge of an air wing of about 760 troops on his deployment for Operation Freedom Sentinel and Enduring Freedom, and he was stationed in Qatar. He reached out through our agency to see if there was any sort of support he could get for his troops for the holiday season, and Barry Crane and North Sound Community Church definitely came through. In fact, when the request got to Barry Crane, he put the wheels in motion to take care of his air wing. Thanks to a sizable donation from them, Corporal Smith was able to put together a locally catered holiday meal for all 760 members of his air wing. Corporal Smith noted that most of his troops, it was their first time deployment and they were away for the holidays. If we have a photo of them, that's one of the photos of them. And it's hard to tell, but apparently they really like shawarma. Is that right? Big into the shawarma. So Corporal Smith also noted that not only did North Sound Church's generous donation enhance the morale of his own people, but it really provided a boost to the local economy. And one Turkish national who was actually living there and running a standalone kitchen behind a gas station, which is where they got all the food from, and it really helped support his family in the community. The reality is North Sound Church does so much for us in our community, we can't really keep track of it all. And honestly, we just ran out of room on the plaque. So, but for their continued support, we're happy to present them with a Special Business Recognition Award. And in addition to the plaque, Corporal Smith would like to present them with a United States flag and accompanying certificate. The flag was flown aboard a KC-135 tanker during an overseas mission on behalf of North Sound Community Church on Christmas Day 2016. And that's the flag and certificate.
training, who is the lead pastor down at North Summit, is in Israel. He took off day before yesterday, as I recall. So he's with a group over there touring. Yeah, thank you so much. Awesome.
So our next award is the Letter of Commendation, and it is awarded to employees or officers from other law enforcement agencies who perform particularly noteworthy acts of service based on determined and intelligent performance. So at this time, we'd like to have Detective Julie Govantes come up. There she is. Detective Govantes has been with the department for a couple years, but her impact has been immediate. She's been part of our recruiting team. This includes job fairs, hiring panels, and she's been the face of many of our recruiting flyers. Julie's been a big advocate for community engagement. She reads to kids at Chase Lake Elementary, greeted the public at her open house, and was our representative for a media segment about our community. King 5 News came out and put together a roundtable discussion with all the different city departments. Julie was our representative. She highlighted our community outreach programs, crisis training, and work with Special Olympics. And in fact, speaking of Special Olympics, Julie has helped raise money through volunteering for special events. She worked at the Tip-A-Cop events. She's also worked with the local Shop with a Cop events for underprivileged kids. Detective Govantes realizes the importance of community. For all the work she's done this year building community trust, we're proud to present her with the Letter of Commendation Award. And now we'd like to call up Corporal Aaron Greenman. So Corporal Greenman has had a very productive, very busy year. He took over as our training corporal and launched a reformatted in-service training for all the officers in the department. This was a very large undertaking. Another noteworthy undertaking was updating our training room. The room had not been updated in several years, and Corporal Greenman added the United States and state flag, commissioned a mural for the front of the room, and switched out the projector and added a podium. Corporal Greenman is also a fantastic instructor. He taught a 2 to 3 hour block of instruction at our regional training. This was a year-long commitment, having to do this every month. The material he covered dealt with how to limit officer deaths, specifically motor vehicle crashes, that could have been avoided. Another example is his desire to help out fellow officers with our peer support program. The program is designed to bolster the health and well-being of our staff. He recently took over as team leader and has been putting things in place, making it more accessible to all of us. Corporal Greenman continues to be a resource for the school district and teaches the DARE program at Maplewood School. He's also very active outside of the department, and for many years he's used his vacation time to lead kayaking events for young cancer patient survivors. And for all of his work in and out of the office, we're proud to present him with a Letter of Commendation. Yeah, you bet. All right, now we'd like to call up Officer Greg Mills. You two had your moment? It's all good? Okay. Okay. So during the last... Sorry, I couldn't resist. We go off script sometimes. During the last year, Officer Mills has been on light duty twice due to an injury. Each time, he's been assigned to the records unit, and his work during that time has been nothing short of exceptional. So during his first stint, Officer Mills went through over 50,000 paper case reports that we had filed, isolated the reports we needed to keep, which ones we could destroy via state guidelines, and that allowed us to essentially clean up our entire records unit and remodel it, which was a project long overdue. In his second light duty tour, Officer Mills took an even more daunting project on. He went through 50 years of case reports on microfiche. And if you remember the old library system, these are microfiche, and there's 60 sheets per page, and we had boxes of them. In fact, by my math, we've calculated Officer Mills went through approximately 150,000 case reports, all on microfilm. So, yeah, some of the reports were several hundreds of pages in length, and he'd also had to print them page by page for us to keep them. And right after finishing that project, he moved on to over 20 boxes of developed 35 millimeter film we had dating back into the 90s. Needless to say, all of these things were quite the massive undertaking, and without Greg, we wouldn't have gotten them cleaned up. Our record staff has adopted Greg as one of their own, but that hasn't been truly official until now. So not only are we proud to present Officer Mills with a Letter of Commendation Award, but he also gets his very own Royal Blue Records Unit polo. So now... And that says Records Guru on the title.
Very spontaneous, folks.
All right, our next one is Officer Brittany Johnson, and she's not here this evening because she is on military deployment. So in March of 2017, a frantic call was placed to 911. A woman was screaming that her husband was bleeding. This was taking place at a local motel in the parking lot, and there were very few details about what was actually happening. Officer Johnson was the first to respond, and she found the man in the passenger seat of a vehicle. He was barely conscious, extremely pale, and bleeding profusely. The man had lost so much blood that it was actually pooling on the driver's side of the vehicle. He had recently had a major medical procedure, and the bandages on his leg had torn off, which caused this massive bleeding. Recognizing this was a life-saving situation, Officer Johnson used the tourniquet she carries at all times and applied it to the man's leg. It was enough to stop the hemorrhaging and buy time for the aid crew to show up and provide more advanced life-saving measures. The medical staff at the hospital estimated he had lost a little over 2 of the 5 liters of blood that he had, and anything more potentially would have been fatal. They noted that without Officer Johnson's tourniquet and life-saving measures, he likely would have died. Because of her quick thinking and life-saving actions, we're proud to present her with a letter of commendation. And now we'd like to have Detective Andy Mell and Detective Julie Govantes for round number 2. Detective Andy Mell and Julie Govantes were assigned to a brutal stabbing case in the summer of 2017. One victim found in an apartment parking lot when our patrol units arrived. He had a stab wound to the abdomen. The second victim was found inside an apartment, and he had 11 stab wounds and was near death. Thankfully, he was stabilized at Harborview Medical Center. Detectives Mel and Govantes began working on the case immediately. After multiple interviews, they were able to identify the suspect and got a family member to provide key information about him. And after another round of interviews and some keen detective work, they figured the suspect had actually been driven out of state already. Detective Mel was able to track the suspect all the way to Pasadena, California. Law enforcement in that area found the suspect and arrested him based on Detective Mel's information. Detective Mel then flew to California, where the suspect was being held, and interviewed him, where he admitted to the stabbing. He was ultimately sent back to Snohomish County to stand trial for 2 counts of first-degree assault. Thanks to their excellent work on this case, a seriously violent felon was taken off the streets. And it's our privilege to present them with a letter of commendation for their excellent work. And at this time, we'd like to call up Fire Captain Christopher Karg. And did we have a fire rep for him? Okay. He is out of town, we know that. So we're very thankful for the partnership we have with our local South Snohomish County Fire and Rescue employees. This was especially true while our officers were dealing with a particularly dangerous incident. We were called to a local hotel for a very drunk, out-of-control person. He was with a group of people, and they just couldn't handle him and get him the help that he needed. When our officers arrived, they spent considerable time trying to talk the man onto a stretcher for transport to the hospital. Things were going okay at first, but then it took a turn for the worse, much worse. While waiting for the elevator to get the man downstairs, he suddenly grabbed the gun of one of our officers and tried to get it out of the holster. The room they were in was tight, and a large group of onlookers was nearby. Had he been able to get the officer's gun out, this could have been a disastrous scene. When he realized the man had grabbed his gun, the officer alerted everybody around him and began struggling with the man to keep it in the holster. This is where Fire Captain Karg comes in. He was on the same side of the stretcher as the officer who was now fighting with the man over his gun. And instead of backing up from the dangerous situation, Fire Captain Karg jumped into the fray. He pinned the man down to the stretcher while he was still trying to get the officer's gun away. As you can tell, this was a really dangerous situation with a potentially deadly outcome. But thanks to his willingness to act, we're pleased to present him with a letter of commendation. All right, so our next group, we're going to need Officer Earl Yamani, Douglas Compton, Sergeant Ken Ploger, Linwood Officer Zach Bird, who's now county, I apologize, but that just happened, right? Okay. I also need Officer Patrick Clark, Robert Peck, Dietrich Borst, and Sergeant David Machado. Okay, can we do some rearranging here? Can I have Machado, Borst, Peck, and Clark all in a row?
All in a row.
Mm-hmm.
How about if we take Patrick?
That'll work.
Okay.
All right. There we go. Perfect. So one of the best parts of this job is that you never know what's in store for you on any given shift. And one of the worst things is you never know what's in store for you on any given shift. The officers in front of you had no idea what was in store for them when they came to work on March 23, 2017. A call from neighbors in the 19100 block of Olympic View Drive of loud banging and glass quickly escalated. One person even called in possible gunshots. When the initial officers arrived, they could see the residence where the noise was coming from. The cars in the garage were damaged and things were spread everywhere. The house was surrounded, and it was then that Officer Peck saw a man walking around inside the house, completely naked. Moments later, smoke began pouring from the house. The officers split into two groups, one led by Sergeant Ploger, containing Officer Yamani, Compton, and Bird. They got inside the bottom floor but had to retreat due to the smoke buildup. Given the house was now on fire, they began evacuating nearby residents. The other group, led by Sergeant Machado, contained Officer Peck, Clark, and Borst. They ended up inside the upper house. When Sergeant Machado's team entered the building, they realized the man had a gas can in one hand and a lighter in the other. He had been going around the house setting fires. The naked man ignored the officer's commands and fought through a strike from Sergeant Machado's taser. He moved into the garage and set both cars on fire with the officers right behind him. Officer Peck used his taser, which allowed Officer Clark and Borst to get him into handcuffs. This was all occurring while the officers were a few feet from two burning cars and a garage that was now on fire. Once they got the man outside, they got him medical attention and the fire department moved in to put out the flames. In the write-up for this incident, Sergeant Machado noted that in 27 years of law enforcement, this was one of the most intensely dangerous events he's ever been part of. And we agree. For their actions on the night of March 23rd, we recognize Sergeant Ken Ploger, Officer Yamani, Officer Compton, and Officer Bird with a letter of commendation.
Bear with us, this will take just a moment.
The chief has to be in every photo in case you haven't noticed. All right, so stay up front, because our next award that we'll be issuing is the Distinguished Service Citation for Valor. It is the highest honor given by the Edmonds Police Department and awarded to an employee who performs an act of heroism in the face of great personal danger or risk of life. And because of their bravery, fighting with a suspect inside a burning garage, the Edmonds Police Department is proud to present Officer Peck, Officer Clark, Officer Borst, and Sergeant Machado with the Distinguished Service Citation for Valor. So our next award for the evening is the Meritorious Service Citation. This is given to an employee for laudable or extraordinary act or outstanding community service. At this time, we'd like to call up Police Chaplain Ken Gatos. Representing him this evening will be his son Tim. So if you could come up. And also present are two of his grandsons, Ethan and Aiden. Oh, okay. Okay. And if we have any chaplains here or anyone from Support 7, the chief would like you to come forward as well. Great. Come on up.
Come on, please.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty impressive and should give you a pretty good idea about the man we're going to talk about next. For over 40 years, Ken Gatos has been the face of chaplain program in Snohomish County. Interestingly enough, Ken began his career in media as a reporter for NBC. In 1968, he followed presidential candidates Robert Kennedy and Ronald Reagan. He was present the day of Robert Kennedy's assassination at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles in the same year. After spending 25 years as a reporter, Ken moved to Washington State. And in 1971, he was recruited to become a volunteer chaplain for the Edmonds Fire Department. Very few agencies had chaplains at the time, and this led to Ken getting involved in training other chaplains and growing the local program. But Ken hasn't stopped there. He is actively involved in the International Conference of Police Chaplains Group and even toured overseas, helping other regions start the program. In 1986, while at a drowning scene, Ken realized the need for some sort of safe, warm place for people in crisis. He acquired an old ambulance, and the Support 7 program came into existence. The program has provided warm shelter, food, comfort, and a place to grieve away from onlookers for families at police and fire scenes. The Support 7 program was the first in the nation. Since then, it has been modeled by more than 500 cities worldwide. This came about because Ken saw the need to provide a place to care for families and friends whose lives have suddenly been touched by pain. But that's just who Ken is. Over the last 4 decades, Ken has been there for the people in their worst moments. All of us have been at a scene where people are hurting and watched Ken care for others. We can only speculate on the number of people whose lives he has touched. Ken has also touched our lives beyond helping out at tragic investigation scenes. You'd find him wandering the halls of the police station, attending shift briefings, or seeking you out when he heard something was going on in your life. Altogether, Ken has given over 45 years of his life as a chaplain in this community. Ken once said that at times of crisis, people don't always remember what was said or talked about, they just remember you were there. As long as we can remember, Ken has been there. Ken is not able to be with us tonight due to medical complications. He's in a hospital in California. Chief Compan and I talked to him briefly on the phone yesterday. He called us last night, and he provided this recorded statement. Hopefully we get this to work.
Just know that the privilege has been mine since these days, and that's all I can say is that we are in this together, and God gives us strength at whatever stage we're in.
And also in typical Ken fashion, last night about 10:30, He sent the chief and I several lengthy text messages apologizing for not being able to make it here tonight. And he also wrote one message which we thought we would read to you. It says, "Good evening, gentlemen. With deepest regrets, I am unable to be with you for the very meaningful and wonderful evening you have always planned for so many of our gifted citizens and officers. Whatever my responsibility has been over the years, it has always been a tremendous, true joy and absolute honor to be among the many recipients and citizens present. Once again, as a blessed volunteer colleague and servant with the Edmonds Police Department, may I join you in paying each of them most grateful thanks." For his years of dedication to this community, the Edmonds Police Department is proud to recognize Captain Ken Gatos with the Meritorious Service Citation. Also worth pointing out is Tim is also a chaplain. He's a chaplain for the Seattle Mariners and Seattle Sounders, which sounds like a pretty cool job. So now we're going to move on to the non-commissioned employee of the year. Each year, one of our members is recognized as the non-commissioned employee of the year. This employee is nominated by fellow department members and is reflective of the recipient's significant achievement and dedication. With us tonight is American Legion Post 66, and they've been a very strong supporter of ours. In past years, they provided us an annual law enforcement appreciation dinner, and in more recent years, they partnered with us as we recognize our employees of the year. So with us tonight, we'd like to invite up Commander Jim Collins and Adjutant Les Abel. If you two would come up, please. This year, our non-commissioned employee of the year is Executive Assistant Caroline Thompson. She's been up here the whole time, folks.
This is a total surprise, she said.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. If you call the police station to talk to the chief, you end up talking to Caroline. However, most of us in the building would argue that when she picks up the phone, you've already reached the chief. I often put, in quotes, to the woman who runs the police department on most of the Post-it notes I give her. And in case you can't tell already, Caroline has her hands in virtually every aspect of running the police department. In recent years, public disclosure has become a big part of her job. Caroline completes all the requests we get for personnel records and emails. Some of these requests can take months of work. It's not uncommon for her to run a search and realize she may have 20,000 emails or more to go through. And her level of knowledge on this topic is excellent. In fact, she's a certified public records officer and sits on the certification committee for the state's Record Association. Caroline has a big hand in making sure our budgets and contracts stay on track. And in fact, the ceremony you're at tonight wouldn't happen without Caroline. However, there are two main things Caroline does for us that cannot be stressed enough. First, she makes the challenging task of payroll look easy, and without her, we don't get paid. She keeps track of a very complicated pay system where employee pay increases are often based on service times and other specialties. Caroline does the labor behind the scenes to make sure it all goes smoothly. She's essentially a one-person finance department embedded within the police department. And perhaps the most important thing she does, she keeps the chief in line. And trust us when I say this, that is no small task. As I mentioned before, when people stop in to see the boss, they're really just there to see Caroline. Caroline was last selected for this award in 2014, and we tried very hard to hide it from her then, but she is so involved, it was impossible for me to hide it then, and I didn't even try this year. So it wouldn't be hard to argue that she could get the award every year for her contributions, and we all agree it's time to honor her once again. At this time, we'd like to invite the American Legion to make their comments and present their award to her.
Thank you, Shane, very much. Representing the American Legion here in Edmonds, which was first formed in 1924, we have always relied upon the strong working relationship we have had with the Edmonds Police Department. In so doing, many, many times, it comes upon the non-commissioned employees to help us in what we try to endeavor. So the citation reads from the American Legion, the Law Enforcement Certificate of Commendation is presented to the Non-Commissioned Employee of the Year, Carolyn Thompson. This 16th day of May, 2018, for outstanding public service to the community, the state, and our nation. It's presented by Frank Freeze Post 66, signed by Commander James Collins, and also our adjutant, Les Abel. We're much appreciated. Carolyn?
You'll be up for the next one. Yeah. Your photos for that. There's cameras everywhere. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thank you to the Legion for that. And now the Edmonds Police Department is proud to present Executive Assistant Caroline Thompson with the award as the Non-Commissioned Employee of the Year. Okay. Yeah, just stay up there, guys. So now we'll move on to the Chief David N. Stern Memorial Officer of the Year Award. Each year, one of our members is recognized as the Officer of the Year. This employee is nominated by fellow department employees and then selected by previous recipients. This award is reflective of the recipient's significant achievements and dedication. The award is given to a full-time, fully commissioned police officer. At this time, we'd like to call up Sergeant Ken Ploger. I don't have that look on your face. He gave me that look like, but he's smiling inside. This year's selection for the Chief David N. Stern Memorial Officer of the Year Award is Sergeant Ken Ploger. Sergeant Ploger is entering his 28th year with the Edmonds Police Department. And, if you can see from this photo, his hairstyle has changed a bit over the years. Yeah. We keep all photos. And you'll notice that's a much younger version of Chief Compan there in the left. Yeah, he still had gray hair at the time, but, and we don't know if he's laughing at what's said or the ponytail. Sergeant Ploger currently runs our street crimes unit. This was cut years ago when the economy took a downturn, but under Ken's guidance, it's back and running smoothly. Ken has a variety of skills he brings to the table, all of which he's been teaching the officers in his unit. These include street-level narcotics, seizure investigations, prostitution cases, problem and drug house abatement, as well as significant felony investigations. He has also mentored his unit in tactical situations, surveillance techniques, handling informants, and search warrant execution. As you can see from this list, Ken has a wealth of knowledge, and most importantly, he's not afraid to share it with others. As you heard over the course of tonight, we have had several major cases during the year. Ken has had a big part in many of those. He played an active role in the stabbing case from the summer, the house fire, and a homicide from this last January. Ken and his unit have tracked down felons throughout the county for major cases we've worked. He's done this in partnership with our detective unit. His willingness to help out has led to some seriously dangerous people being taken off the streets. Ken has recently taken over as our department range master. That's a big task for an already busy guy. He started a major research project and will soon be switching to a new department handgun, which means even more firearms training for Ken to do. During this past year, Ken has demonstrated he has used his talents and experience to mentor and lead a new unit to a great deal of success. Based on his excellent leadership, the Edmonds Police Department is proud to name Sergeant Ken Ploger as Police Officer of the Year. Okay, that's round one. So as in past years, the American Legion has bestowed their special award to our Officer of the Year, and again, Mr. Collins will present.
Thank you, Shane. It is our privilege to be here tonight representing the American Legion for Post 66 here in Edmonds. It is a shame we can't give each and every officer and support people one of these, because they certainly deserve it. Again, as I said before, the American Legion's Law Enforcement Certificate of Commendation is presented this year to the Officer of the Year, Sergeant Ken Ploger, dated this 16th day of May, 2018, for outstanding public service to the community, the state, and to our nation. It's presented by the Frank Fees Post 66 here in Edmonds, signed by Commander James Collins and Adjutant Les Abel.
Thank you.
The department's Officer of the Year award was renamed in 2008 as the Chief David N. Stern Memorial Officer of the Year Award to reflect the level of professional service provided by Chief Stern to the Edmonds Police Department. Chief Stern passed away on April 25, 2007. With us tonight from the Noontime Rotary Club of Edmonds is Mr. Scott James and Miss Darlene Stern, for whose husband the award is named. And if they would come up and make their remarks, please.
Well, good evening. And congratulations to all the honorees. My name is Scott James, and I'm the president of the Rotary Club of Edmonds. At the Rotary, we have a motto, service above self. And we practice this motto by giving money, resources, and time to help improve the lives of people around the world and locally. David Stern also lived by this motto, as evidenced by his volunteerism and his commitment to the Chamber of Commerce and also the Rotary Club of Edmonds. David Stern's dedication to service propelled him to become president of the Chamber for 3 years. And he was next in line to become president of our Rotary Club. David Stern also applied his leadership qualities at the workplace as chief of the Edmonds Police Department. However, he's already heard, Chief Stern was taken from us prematurely by a burst cranial aneurysm. Soon after Chief Stern's passing, Rotary members, city leaders, Darlene, then acting chief Compan, they began working together to identify a way to recognize Chief Stern's contributions to the community. What better way to remember Chief Stern than by honoring each year an Edmonds police officer that exemplifies the integrity, stalwartness, and the willingness to serve that were the hallmarks of Chief Stern. As you've heard, Sergeant Ploger has been applying his talents, expertise, and experience by mentoring and teaching officers safe and constructive investigative techniques in both the Street Crimes Unit and also as range master. He exemplifies the Rotary motto, service above self, and also the Edmonds Police Department, service before self. It is my great pleasure to present the Rotary Club of Edmonds David N. Stern Officer of the Year Award to Sergeant Ploger. Congratulations.
Good evening. As you've heard, my name is Darlene Stern. I am the widow of the former police chief. I'm also a Rotarian and a current member and a past president of the Edmonds Police Foundation. Gratitude seems to be in short supply across our United States, but not here in Edmonds. When law enforcement, the citizens of Edmonds, the VFW, American Legion, Noon Rotary Club, and the Edmonds Police Foundation act in cooperative collaboration, they acknowledge the importance of all the work that our police department does for us every day. It also acknowledges the valuable asset that the citizenry, I can say that word, provide to law enforcement and to our community. Studies have established that the expression of gratitude can have profound effects on not only our well-being, but how we perceive our community. If we invest in seeing the world from a reasonable and affirmative perspective, we increase the happiness and enjoyment of our life and our neighborhoods. Never more than now would it be appropriate to acknowledge the truth that gratitude heals wounds of many kinds. But it only works if the gratitude is authentic. These law enforcement award ceremonies are from the heart. The American Legion, VFW, and Rotary, in collaboration with the police department, demonstrate their appreciation of the citizens who stepped forward to help, and the professionalism of this department and their dedication to the Edmonds community. This back and forth gratitude between law enforcement, the civic entities, and public are what make this special place, Edmonds, a warm community to work and live in. We can all carry this gratitude into our various families, neighborhoods, and business centers, sharing the stories of the selfless efforts made by the men and women being honored here tonight. Gratitude helps us feel considerably more connected with each other and heals many areas in our lives. My thanks to all of the men and women of the Edmonds Police Department, and to all the civic entities represented here this evening, and to all the citizens for sharing in this event, and for making Edmonds a great place to live. Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll turn the podium back over to the chief, and he'll close us out.
Thank you so much. I had one minor oversight that I have to remedy, so bear with me just a moment. Caroline, I want to get a photo with your plaque. Once again, totally spontaneous. Monty, are you ready? Yeah. All right, so act surprised, Caroline. All right, really surprised after learning. Well, what a great night. If this doesn't make all of us appreciative of this community, I don't know what else we can do. I mean, we pulled out all the stops tonight. Very, very special night, and I thank all of you for being here with us, for this recognition of achievement, as well as remembering those in our profession who go out here 24/7 and still do the job, as well as those who have gone before us. We appreciate the efforts of our own employees, our fellow law enforcement officers and surrounding agencies, counties, and states across the United States, and of our citizens and volunteers for all that is done throughout each and every year to maintain the quality of life through public safety. I'd, this time, as part of our closing, to ask all of you to rise. You're probably going to stretch your legs for a moment anyway, so please stand up, and in a moment, we're going to experience something which I think you will find very meaningful. You will hear taps played by Debbie Dawson, who's a retired member of the police department here in Edmonds. And as taps begins, it's appropriate for uniformed personnel to come to a position of attention and for all of us to place our hand over our heart. When taps concludes, we will all lower our hand but remain standing for a moment to reflect on our fallen brothers and sisters in law enforcement. Debbie Dawson. Again, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Before we conclude, you can remain standing as we've done here momentarily. But I again like to give special thanks to Ms. Caroline Thompson for helping orchestrate the order of the awards. It's a lot of work goes into making all this happen and make it happen smoothly. I also like to recognize Sergeant Shane Hawley for his contributions with getting the narrative together tonight and putting the entire program piece by piece together so it flowed very well. Please join us now for some light refreshments provided by the Edmonds Noontime Rotary. Thank you again for joining us. I bid you a very, very pleasant good evening.